Hand over your security badge and clear your desk." By noon, Gerald sneered, sliding a heavy blue folder across the polished mahogany conference table. "Your 12% equity option pool is revoked effective immediately." I picked up my Mont Blanc pen, signed the formal acknowledgement, without a single word of protest, and walked out of the 42nd floor executive suite. 48 hours later, 47 desperate missed calls lit up my private phone as their $450 million corporate merger collapsed into total financial insolvency. To understand how a single signature on a Tuesday morning shattered a multi-million-dollar corporate empire, you have to go back 18 years to the spring of 2008. I was 34 years old when I joined Apex Industrial Holdings as their principal M&A architect. Back then, Apex was nothing more than a struggling regional manufacturing firm with $40 million in debt and a chaotic ledger. Over the next 18 years, I sacrificed my personal life, working 80-hour weeks to restructure their debt, negotiate strategic acquisitions, and expand the corporate footprint across 3 continents. By 2026, I had turned 52, and Apex had grown into an industrial powerhouse, generating $120 million in annual recurring revenue. My primary crowning achievement was finalizing the crown jewel acquisition of Titan Automation Systems, a deal valued at $450 million. For 2 agonizing years, I led the cross-border negotiations, navigating complex antitrust filings, SEC compliance regulations, and intricate equity swap ratios. Under my master plan, Apex would acquire Titan using a combination of leveraged debt and new equity issuance. As part of my original employment covenant signed with the late founder, I held a fully vested 12% equity option pool in the parent entity, an ownership stake worth exactly $54 million upon the closing of the Titan merger. However, the corporate landscape at Apex shifted dramatically 6 months ago when the founder passed away. The board of directors, dominated by short-sighted institutional investors, appointed Gerald Thornton as the new chief executive officer. Gerald was a 58-year-old corporate politician whose background was built on cost-cutting gimmicks and aggressive public relations, rather than actual operational finance. Within weeks of taking the corner office, Gerald brought in his 32-year-old nephew, Julian Thornton, appointing him as vice president of corporate strategy. Julian was an arrogant, Ivy League graduate with 0 transaction experience who viewed the corporate hierarchy as his personal playground. From his very first week, Julian targeted my department. He resented the fact that a veteran strategist held such substantial equity power and commanded the absolute respect of our institutional lenders. Julian began questioning my deal structures during executive committee meetings, attempting to diminish my 18-year legacy by claiming that the Titan transaction was overpriced. In reality, Julian and Gerald had devised a predatory internal conspiracy. They realized that if they could remove me from the company prior to the formal closing of the Titan transaction on July 31st, my 12% equity option pool would revert back to the corporate treasury under a legacy clawback clause they intended to misinterpret. By distributing my $54 million equity stake among the board, Gerald and Julian planned to secure their own massive performance bonuses while delivering a windfall to key directors. Throughout June of 2026, the atmosphere inside the corporate headquarters became increasingly hostile. Julian began overriding my instructions to the legal team, delaying critical regulatory filings, and attempting to renegotiate finalized debt covenants with our syndicate banks. I observed their clumsy maneuvers with quiet detachment. What Gerald and Julian failed to realize was that corporate finance is not played with loud speeches or executive bravado. It is governed strictly by the precise language written into binding legal documents executed years before they ever set foot in the building. 6 years prior, in the summer of 2020, Apex faced a severe liquidity crunch during a global market contraction. To raise $80 million in emergency capital without diluting existing shareholders, I personally structured a special purpose vehicle holding entity named Vance Capital Holding LLC. Through this independent Delaware entity, I secured $180 million in senior convertible Series B preferred debt notes from a consortium of private institutional investors who trusted my personal oversight. Because I personally guaranteed the risk management protocols, the credit agreement included a vital, ironclad covenant known as Section 14B. Section 14B of the Convertible Credit Agreement stipulated that if the primary architect of the financial structure, defined explicitly by name as Harold Vance, was involuntarily terminated by Apex Industrial Holdings without prior written consent and cause approval from the Series B preferred note holders, a default acceleration trigger would immediately initiate. Upon activation, Apex would be legally mandated to repay the entire $180 million principal balance, plus a 12% default penalty fee totaling $201,600,000 within 48 business hours. Furthermore, if Apex failed to satisfy the cash debt call within that 48-hour window, 100% of the Class A golden voting shares of Apex Industrial Holdings would automatically transfer to the noteholder entity, stripping the board of directors of all legal authority over the company. Neither Gerald nor Julian had bothered to read the full 500-page closing binders from the 2020 credit restructuring. They assumed that because Vance Capital Holding was an external entity, it was merely another passive lender that could be managed by corporate legal counsel. They believed I was just an aging executive who could be intimidated into accepting a modest severance package and quietly fading into retirement. On the morning of Tuesday, July 28th, 3 days before the scheduled closing of the Titan merger, Gerald called an emergency meeting in the grand conference room. As I sat down with my leather portfolio, I noticed Julian sitting next to Gerald, wearing a smug, triumphant smirk. Lead corporate counsel Audra Bennett sat at the far end of the table, looking visibly uncomfortable with her eyes fixed on her laptop screen. Gerald did not offer a cup of coffee or engage in casual pleasantries. He pushed the blue folder across the table and declared my employment terminated for structural redundancy, asserting that my 12% equity pool was entirely forfeited. Julian leaned forward, telling me that security was already standing outside my office to escort me out of the premises. I did not raise my voice, slam my hand on the table, or threaten litigation. I calmly picked up my Mont Blanc pen, signed the official acknowledgement of notice, and looked Gerald directly in the eye. I closed my portfolio, stood up, buttoned my navy suit jacket, and walked out into the corridor. Gerald and Julian exchanged victorious smiles, believing they had just saved $54 million. They had no idea they had just pulled the pin on a financial grenade that was about to vaporize their entire corporate existence. The glass doors of the executive suite clicked shut behind me as 2 armed corporate security guards stepped into formation on either side of my path. The sight of a 52-year-old senior strategist being escorted like a criminal caused whispers to ripple across the open-plan trading floor. Young analysts and senior department heads turned from their monitors, their faces filled with shock. For 18 years, I had walked those marble hallways as the primary architect of Apex Industrial Holdings. I had hired half the senior managers in that building, negotiated every credit facility that paid their salaries, and guided the enterprise through 2 major global recessions. Now, Gerald Thornton and his nephew Julian were putting on a cheap public display of dominance to signal to the rest of the company that a new regime was in absolute control. Julian followed 3 steps behind us, holding an iPad and barking instructions to the IT department to immediately disable my corporate network credentials, revoke my remote VPN access, and wipe my company-issued phone. I kept my posture straight, my stride measured, and my expression entirely unbothered. When we reached my corner office on the 41st floor, Julian stood leaning against the doorframe, crossing his arms with a condescending smile. He watched intently as I opened my desk drawer, taking only my personal leather-bound notebook, a framed photograph of my late mentor, and my personal brass keys. "You really thought you were untouchable, didn't you, Harold?" Julian remarked, his voice dripping with arrogance as he tapped his fingers on his iPad screen. "You sat in this office holding 12% of the company while the rest of us worked to modernize the firm. Uncle Gerald and I took a vote with the Compensation Committee last night. Section 9 of the amended corporate bylaws allows us to reclassify your option pool as unvested surplus upon termination for operational restructuring. That $54 million is going straight back to the Treasury to fund our strategic expansion plan. You're yesterday's news. I placed my framed photograph into my briefcase, zipped it shut, and turned to face Julian. I looked at the 32-year-old vice president, noticing the cheap bravado masking his utter lack of foundational financial knowledge. He genuinely believed that corporate ownership was governed by superficial internal memos and hasty board votes passed without legal quorum. "Julian," I replied softly, my voice completely steady and void of anger. "In corporate finance, arrogance is an expensive emotion. You and your uncle have spent 6 months studying the surface of this company, but you never took the time to inspect the foundation. I suggest you enjoy the next 48 hours in this corner office. It will be the shortest tenure in the history of Apex." Julian let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, shaking his head. "Is that a threat, Harold? Are you going to hire a trial lawyer and sue us for wrongful termination?" "Go right ahead. Our legal defense retainer is $2 million a year. You'll be tied up in Delaware Chancery Court for the next 5 years while we close the Titan merger and collect our performance bonuses." I did not bother responding. I slid my brass keys onto the mahogany desk, picked up my briefcase, and walked past him toward the private executive elevators. As the silver doors glided open, I glanced back one last time at the bustling floor of Apex Industrial Holdings. The guards escorted me down to the underground parking garage, where my dark gray sedan was parked in space number 1. I placed my briefcase in the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove out into the bright morning sunlight of downtown Wilmington. Instead of driving home to wallow in self-pity or pacing around my living room in anger, I pulled into the parking lot of a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks away from the Delaware State Chancery Court building. I opened my laptop, connected to a secure encrypted mobile hotspot, and accessed the private portal of Vance Capital Holding LLC. For 6 years, Vance Capital had operated quietly out of an office in Dover, serving as the master holding entity for the Series B preferred debt notes that financed Apex's global acquisitions. At 11:15 a.m., precisely 75 minutes after Gerald handed me the termination letter, I dialed a direct encrypted line to Audra Bennett, lead corporate counsel for Apex. Audra was an exceptionally sharp 48-year-old attorney who had worked alongside me during the complex debt restructurings of 2020. She had been forced to sit silently during Gerald's ambush in the boardroom because a retainer was managed directly by the board of directors, but I knew she was a strict legal formalist who understood the absolute sanctity of binding credit contracts. "Harold," Audra said, her voice filled with visible stress as she answered on the first ring, "I am so sorry about what happened in the boardroom. I tried to tell Gerald and Julian yesterday that executing an abrupt termination of your position right before the Titan closing was an enormous strategic mistake, but they refused to listen. They are convinced that your equity option pool can be reclaimed without consequence." "Audra," I said calmly, taking a slow sip of my black coffee, "I am not calling to discuss my equity pool or file an employment lawsuit. I am calling in my official capacity as the managing member and sole controlling director of Vance Capital Holding LLC." There was a sudden, heavy silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of Audra's pen dropping onto her desk. "Harold, what are you talking about?" she asked quietly, her voice instantly dropping an octave as professional alarm set in. "Audra," I continued, "open binder 4 of the 2020 Senior Convertible Credit Agreement between Apex Industrial Holdings and Vance Capital Holding LLC. Turn to page 312, section 14B, subsection C. Read the explicit covenant regarding the mandatory retention of the principal financial architect." I waited patiently on the line as I heard the frantic rustling of paper on her end. For 3 long minutes, the only sound was the sound of Audra turning heavy legal pages. Then came a sudden sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God," Audra whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Oh my God. Gerald didn't run the credit agreements through external debt counsel before drafting your termination papers. He thought it was just a standard employment contract." Ride the clause into the record. Audra, I instructed quietly. Section 14B, she read, her voice shaking as she scanned the dense legal text. In the event that Harold Vance is involuntarily removed, terminated, or demoted from his operational position as Chief M&A Architect of Apex Industrial Holdings, without the prior written consent of the Series B note holder, such action shall constitute an immediate event of default. Upon notice of default, the note holder reserves the absolute right to accelerate the full principal repayment of $180 million plus a 12% default penalty fee payable in full within 48 hours. Failure to satisfy the accelerated debt call shall result in the immediate and mandatory forfeiture of all Class A golden voting shares of the parent entity to the note holder. Precisely, I said calmly. As of 10:15 a.m. this morning, Apex Industrial Holdings is in formal material breach of Section 14B. I am emailing you the official notice of accelerated default signed by Vance Capital Holding LLC. You have exactly 48 hours to deliver $201,600,000 to our escrow account at JP Morgan Chase. If the funds are not cleared by Thursday morning at 10:15 a.m., Vance Capital will exercise its right to repossess 100% of the Class A voting shares and assume immediate operational control of Apex Industrial Holdings. Have a good afternoon, Audra. After ending the call with Audra, I closed my laptop, placed it neatly inside my leather briefcase, and drove to my private office in downtown Dover. The office was quiet, minimalist, and completely decoupled from the chaotic atmosphere of corporate headquarters. For 6 years, this was where the true financial engineering of Vance Capital Holding LLC took place. While Gerald Thornton was busy hosting lavish press conferences, and Julian was strutting around executive suites, boasting about his modern management theories, I had quietly built an unassailable financial fortress designed to protect the integrity of the enterprise against corporate piracy. By 1 o'clock that afternoon, the official notice of default was formally served upon the executive board of Apex Industrial Holdings via certified legal courier and electronic transmission. Attached to the notice was a copy of the original 2020 senior convertible credit agreement, bearing Gerald's own predecessor's signature and ratified by the Delaware State Division of Corporations. In the corporate world, arrogance is usually fueled by ignorance of debt structure. Most chief executives view credit agreements as simple loan documents that live in dusty filing cabinets. They fail to understand that modern corporate finance relies on complex cross-collateralization and restrictive covenants. When Gerald and Julian terminated my employment, they did not just fire an individual executive. They severed the single load-bearing legal pillar that kept their entire $450 million acquisition project structurally sound. To make matters infinitely worse for Gerald, the impending $450 million acquisition of Titan Automation Systems relied entirely on a bridging credit line provided by a consortium of commercial banks led by Bank of America. That bridging facility contained a standard cross-default clause. Under Section 22 of the Bank Syndicate Agreement, any uncured default event exceeding $10 million in any subsidiary or parent entity automatically froze all pending loan disbursements. At 2:30 p.m., Audra Bennett sprinted into Gerald Thornton's 42nd floor executive corner office, clutching the legal notice from Vance Capital Holding LLC. Sitting across from Gerald was his nephew Julian, along with 3 key members of the board's compensation committee. They were in the middle of celebrating their apparent victory, drinking expensive scotch, and reviewing a draft press release announcing the restructuring of my 12% equity pool. Gerald, Audra announced, slamming the heavy legal binder onto the coffee table right between their crystal glasses. You need to read this immediately. We are in catastrophic legal and financial default, Gerald frowned, setting his glass down with an irritated sigh. Audra, calm down. What are you talking about? Harold's lawyers sending a demand letter? Let them sue. I told you he has no grounds. We terminated him under Section 9 of the internal bylaws for operational redundancy. This isn't an employment lawsuit, Gerald, Audra shouted, her voice echoing off the glass walls of the office. Harold didn't sue us. He just activated Section 14B of the 2020 Convertible Debt Agreement through his private entity, Vance Capital Holding LLC. Julian smirked, waving his hand dismissively. Vance Capital? That's just our passive debt syndicate entity. What are they going to do? Issue a polite, stern note. We pay our monthly interest installments on time. They have no standing to interfere with internal staffing decisions. You complete idiot! Audra snapped, turning her anger directly onto Julian. Vance Capital isn't just a passive lender. Harold Vance is the sole managing member and controlling owner of Vance Capital. 6 years ago, when the company was on the brink of collapse, Harold personally secured $180 million in debt notes to keep this firm alive. And inside that agreement, he inserted an ironclad key man default clause. Because you terminated him without Vance Capital's prior written consent, the entire $180 million debt principal has been accelerated. Gerald's face instantly drained of all color. He leaned forward, grabbing the document off the table, his eyes scanning the dense legal text as his hands began to tremble faintly. Accelerated? Gerald stammered, his voice suddenly losing its booming authority. What do you mean, accelerated? It means, Audra explained coldly, that Apex Industrial Holdings has exactly 48 hours to pay Vance Capital $201,600,000 in cash. And if we fail to wire those funds by Thursday morning at 10:15 a.m., Vance Capital automatically repossesses 100% of our Class A golden voting shares. The entire board of directors will be stripped of authority, and Harold Vance will become the sole owner of Apex. Julian's smug expression completely evaporated. He stood up from his chair, grabbing the binder from his uncle's hands. This is insane. This has to be illegal. It's a conflict of interest. He was an employee of this company. It is completely legal under Delaware General Corporation Law, Section 203, Audra shouted back. It was ratified by the board 6 years ago, filed with the SEC, and disclosed in every annual audit report that you clearly failed to read before taking this job. Before Gerald could process the magnitude of the disaster, his desk phone rang. It was the lead credit officer from Bank of America. Gerald answered on speakerphone, his voice tight. This is Gerald Thornton. Mr. Thornton, the senior vice president of credit risk, announced coldly over the speaker. We have just received automated notification of a material notice of accelerated default filed by Vance Capital Holding LLC in the amount of $201 million. Under Section 22 of our syndicate agreement, all funding for the $450 million Titan Automation acquisition is frozen effective immediately. Furthermore, if this default is not fully cleared within 48 hours, we will initiate formal insolvency proceedings against Apex Industrial Holdings. Good day, sir. The call disconnected with a sharp tone. The corner office fell into dead silence. Gerald stared at the phone as if it had turned into a venomous snake. The $450 million transaction that was supposed to solidify his legacy and earn him a $20 million closing bonus had completely ground to a halt. Julian began pacing frantically around the room, running his hands through his hair. Uncle Gerald, what do? We don't have $200 million in cash. Our total treasury reserves are only $45 million. Gerald looked up slowly, his eyes wide with sheer panic. Call Harold, he whispered, his voice cracking. Call him right now and get him back into this office. Julian pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed my private number. On my desk in Dover, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID, saw Julian's number, and quietly pressed the decline button. Over the next 2 hours, my phone rang 34 times. Gerald and Julian sent frantic emails, text messages, and urgent memos, offering to reinstate my position, double my salary, and restore my 12% equity option pool. I read each message with total calm, sipping a fresh cup of tea. In corporate finance, when you hold the debt covenants, you do not negotiate on your enemy's terms. You let the clock run out. By Wednesday morning, 24 hours after my termination, absolute panic had consumed the upper echelons of Apex Industrial Holdings. News of the frozen bank line and the accelerated debt default had leaked to key institutional shareholders and major trade publications. The stock price of Apex plummeted by 38% in early morning trading, wiping out over $300 million in market capitalization within hours. Inside the corporate headquarters, chaos reigned. Representatives from Titan Automation Systems, realizing that Apex's financing had vanished, issued a formal legal notice threatening to cancel the $450 million merger agreement and file a $50 million breach of contract lawsuit for failed closing conditions. Institutional investors were flooding the board's secretary with emergency demands for an immediate special shareholder meeting. Gerald Thornton had spent the entire night locked in his office with a team of high-priced external litigation attorneys, desperately trying to find a legal loophole to injunction Vance Capital's debt acceleration. But Delaware corporation law is uncompromising when it comes to sophisticated credit agreements executed between institutional parties. The external lead litigation partner took one look at Section 14B and gave Gerald the brutal truth. There was zero chance of obtaining a temporary restraining order. The covenant was airtight, legally binding, and fully enforceable. Apex had to either pay the $201,600,000 in cash by 10:15 a.m. on Thursday morning or surrender total voting control of the enterprise. At 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, Gerald Thornton was forced to swallow his enormous pride. Having failed to reach me by phone or email, he instructed Audra Bennett to contact my legal team and request an emergency face-to-face negotiation meeting at a neutral venue. I agreed to meet them at 3:30 p.m. in the private executive boardroom of the Wilmington Financial Center, 2 floors above my Dover legal team's offices. When I stepped into the boardroom at 3:25 p.m., wearing a crisp charcoal suit and carrying my single leather portfolio, the room was thick with tension. Gerald Thornton looked 10 years older than he had 24 hours prior. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie was loosened, and his arrogant posture had completely vanished. Sitting beside him was his nephew Julian, who sat hunched over in his chair, staring blankly at the table like a defeated child. Lead corporate counsel, Audra Bennett sat at the head of the table, alongside 3 external legal defense partners. I sat down at the far end of the long glass conference table, placing my portfolio flat on the polished surface. I did not offer a handshake or make small talk. "Harold," Gerald began, his voice raspy and devoid of its former booming confidence. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I believe there has been a profound misunderstanding between executive management and your office." "There was no misunderstanding, Gerald," I replied calmly, looking him straight in the eye. "You attempted to steal my vested 12% equity option pool, valued at $54 million, by fabricating a causeless termination under Section 9. You assumed I was a defenseless aging executive who could be intimidated and discarded." Gerald cleared his throat nervously, wiping a drop of sweat from his forehead. "Look, Harold, we admit that the board acted hastily. We were misinformed regarding the structural history of the 2020 credit facilities. We are prepared to make this right immediately. We will issue a formal public statement reinstating you as Chief M&A Architect. We will fully restore your 12% equity option pool, grant you a $5 million retention bonus, and sign a 5-year contract extension. All we ask is that Vance Capital formally rescinds the notice of default and unfreezes the Bank of America credit line so we can close the Titan transaction on Friday." Julian leaned forward, his voice desperate. "Mr. Vance, please. We can execute the reinstatement papers right now. I'll personally step down from my vice president role if that's what it takes. We just need to save the Titan deal." I listened to their frantic pleas with total detachment. I opened my leather portfolio, pulled out a single-paged legal document, and slid it across the glass table toward Gerald. "It's too late for reinstatement," I stated firmly. Gerald picked up the document with trembling hands. "What? What is this?" "That is the binding restructuring and debt settlement agreement offered by Vance Capital Holding LLC, I explained. "It expires precisely at 10:15 a.m. tomorrow morning. There will be no reinstatement of your executive positions, and there will be no retention bonuses." Julian gasped, grabbing the paper to read the terms alongside his uncle. "Under the terms of this agreement," I continued, my voice calm and precise, "Vance Capital will restructure the accelerated debt facility and waive the default penalty under 3 absolute conditions. First, Gerald Thornton and Julian Thornton will execute immediate, irrevocable resignations from all executive offices and surrender their board seats without any severance compensation or golden parachute payouts. Second, the board of directors will immediately appoint me as chief executive officer and chairman of the board of Apex Industrial Holdings. Third, my original 12% equity option pool will be converted directly into Class A golden voting equity shares, giving my private trust permanent controlling interest over the enterprise. This is extortion, Julian screamed, slamming his fist onto the table and standing up. You're demanding that we hand over the entire company to you for nothing. We will fight this in court. Sit down, Julian. Audra Bennett snapped, turning to face the young vice president with blistering contempt. You don't have a court to fight in. If we don't sign this agreement by 10:15 a.m. tomorrow, Vance Capital repossesses 100% of the Class A voting shares anyway under the default covenant. Under Harold's terms, the company survives, the Titan merger closes, and our institutional shareholders don't lose everything. Under your brilliant plan, the company goes into liquidation tomorrow morning, and you and Gerald face shareholder derivative lawsuits for gross breach of fiduciary duty. Gerald stared at the paper in his hands, his mouth open, realizing the absolute trap he had built for himself. If he refused to sign, the debt call would execute in less than 19 hours, bankrupting Apex, vaporizing his personal reputation, and inviting massive legal liability from institutional shareholders for violating Delaware General Corporation Law, Section 141. If he signed, he walked away disgraced and empty-handed, but avoided personal bankruptcy. You engineered this 6 years ago, didn't you, Harold? Gerald whispered, looking up at me with sheer terror in his eyes. You set this trap in 2020. I did not set a trap for anyone, Gerald, I answered softly. I built a protective shield to defend this company against incompetent corporate predators. You simply walked into it because your greed blinded you to basic legal realities. You have until 10:15 a.m. tomorrow to sign. I stood up from the conference table, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the room, leaving Gerald and Julian sitting in total silence as the seconds ticked away. At 9:45 a.m. on Thursday, July 30th, 30 minutes before the absolute expiration of the debt default notice, a signed copy of the restructuring and debt settlement agreement was delivered to my Dover office. Gerald Thornton and Julian Thornton had both signed their irrevocable resignations, surrendering all corporate claims, severance rights, and board seats. Facing the immediate threat of catastrophic legal liability and total personal bankruptcy, they had no choice but to capitulate entirely. At 10 o'clock a.m., the board of directors held an emergency virtual meeting. With Audra Bennett presiding over the legal protocol, the remaining directors unanimously voted to ratify the restructuring agreement. I was formally appointed as Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board of Apex Industrial Holdings. My legacy 12% equity option pool was officially converted into Class A golden voting shares, placing absolute operational and strategic control of the company firmly in my hands. Immediately following the board's vote, I executed an official waiver of the debt default on behalf of Vance Capital Holding LLC. Within 20 minutes, the notice was transmitted to Bank of America. The credit syndicate reinstated the $450 million bridging facility, and the merger with Titan Automation Systems was officially back on track. The following morning, Friday, July 31st, at precisely 10:30 a.m., I stood in the grand auditorium of the Delaware Convention Center to preside over the formal closing ceremony of the Titan acquisition. Wall Street analysts, institutional investors, and trade journalists filled the room. The atmosphere was charged with excitement as the $450 million transaction was completed on schedule. When the closing documents were finalized and the wire transfers cleared, the market responded instantly. Apex Industrial Holdings' stock price rebounded spectacularly, surging 45% by the closing bell and reaching an all-time high valuation. My 12% equity stake, newly secured as Class A voting shares, reached a market value of $67,500,000. As for Gerald Thornton and Julian Thornton, their fall from grace was swift and absolute. News of their disastrous attempt to unlawfully reclaim executive equity and their subsequent forced resignations spread rapidly through the private equity community. Securities regulators initiated a formal inquiry under SEC Rule 10b-5 into their attempt to manipulate corporate options prior to a major liquidity event. Gerald's reputation as a corporate executive was permanently ruined. He was forced to sell his luxury estate in Greenwich to cover millions of dollars in personal legal defense fees arising from institutional shareholder lawsuits. Julian found himself completely blacklisted from every reputable investment firm and private equity group on Wall Street. The young vice president, who had arrogance to spare, boasting about how he would diluting my equity to zero, was left with an uncleared name and zero prospects in corporate finance. On Monday morning, August 3rd, I walked back into the 42nd floor executive suite of Apex Industrial Holdings. The armed security guards, who had been instructed by Julian 6 days prior to escort me out of the building, stood at attention by the glass doors, holding the entrance open and greeting me with profound respect. The open-plan trading floor erupted into spontaneous applause as department heads and analysts welcomed back the architect who had built their company and saved their livelihoods. I walked into the corner office, the very room where Gerald had pushed the blue termination folder across the mahogany table. I sat down behind the executive desk, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling skyline of Wilmington. I reached into my briefcase, took out the framed photograph of my late mentor, and placed it back in its rightful spot on the desk. In the fast-paced world of high-stakes corporate finance, many young executives make the fatal mistake of confusing authority with power. They believe that titles, corner offices, and arrogant speeches allow them to manipulate complex financial systems to satisfy their personal greed. But true corporate power is not found in executive bravado. It is built on years of meticulous foundation, unshakable legal precision, and the quiet mastery of the rules that govern the game. I opened my leather portfolio, pulled out a fresh blue pen, and began reviewing the next quarter's strategic expansion files. Apex Industrial Holdings was stronger than it had ever been, and for the first time in 18 years, the architect was in absolute control.